Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Today, I just want to speak to you about a subject that also asked a question. There, that's better. It it would ask, could a human clone have a soul? Now, the prospect of cloning humans for reproductive purposes raises many moral, ethical, and medical questions. It also touches on deeper theological questions. Perhaps none is more basic than this. Would a soul, would a human, would a clone human itself have a soul? Now, for some, the answer seems obvious. For others, there are reasons to wonder. Some go so far as to claim human cloning would be impossible because no soul would be created. How one views this issue hinges almost completely on his view of how a soul comes to be created. Now, as with other narrow, non salvational topics, the Bible gives no direct or no straight answers. In those circumstances, we ought not to be dogmatic when we ought to be careful. Now, all that being said, and based on several spiritual, scientific, and practical points, it seems the best answer to whether clones would have souls is almost certainly yes. Christians have differing opinions on how immaterial souls are created in that way. There are two biblically supportable positions based on that issue itself, known as the soul, created as Cranianism and Traducianism. The first says God creates the soul when the child is conceived. Then the second says physical conception itself via the parents creates the soul. Other beliefs, such as the pre-existence of souls, are not biblically sound and won't come into play at that point in our lives. Now, before looking any further, it's important to establish these words. Here, human refers to a biological member of Homo sapiens, the material and genetic aspect. Person refers to the complete individual, mind, body, soul, and spirit, with an emphasis on the spiritual aspect. Now, between clone and MZ twin refer to humans created through the processes described below. Now, in typical nuclear transfer cloning, the nucleus information center of an unfertilized egg cell is removed. It is replaced with the nucleus of a donor cell taken from the organism being cloned. This newly formed cell is stimulated and begins to divide. This results in an organism with DNA identical to the donors. In other words, the organism DNA matches the donors itself. Now, in therapeutic cloning, growth happens in a lab environment and creates tissues. While in reproductive cloning, growth happens in the womb of a surrogate mother and can result in the birth of a fully formed duplicate of the donor. Now, biologically speaking, something very much like human clones, like the ones already exist, whether if it's identical twins or monozygotic twins, are the results of this natural process, meaning one sperm and one egg join. creating a single fertilized cell called a zygote. Then this zygote splits into two or more complete separate embryos, which then develop independently like that. MZ twins are, for all practical purposes, each other's clones. In other words, biologically, genetically duplicated humans already exist. The mechanism of their creation is vastly different from laboratory-based cloning. However, though, the end result is materially a variation of each other. This is the key point to understand when examining different views as to whether or not clones have souls. One position must be consistent and applied to both natural clones, such as MZ twins, and those who might eventually come through reproductive cloning. All right? And there is more to it than this. The creationist view would easily affirm that clones have souls, in that God is directly involved in the creation of each soul at the appropriate time. Perhaps God imbues a single soul into a fertilized zygote, creating additional souls if or when the zygote splits. The Bible is not clear for the sake of this issue, when the details itself are irrelevant. According to soul creationism, the method that creates the physical body has nothing to do with their being imbued with a soul. Conceive, clone, or otherwise, the soul creationism views says God creates the soul, and there are no scriptural or spiritual reasons to think he would not do that with all human beings. Not only that, the Traducian view, however, induces several wrinkles. According to Traducianism, both the body and the soul are inherited from the parents. In particular, it holds that a person's sin nature is inherited from Adam's VIA, his or her father. This implies that the moment at which sperm and egg combine to create the DNA of a new human, a soul is simultaneously created. However, though, in cloning, there are no parents only. One human contributing genetic material that is then duplicated. There is no conception, only the replication of existing DNA. All right? This raises the questions about the transmission of souls according to Traducianism. For instance, a clone would have neither a father or a mother in the normal sense. The resulting human would have DNA from only the single donor. Genetically, the clone's father is the donor's father. And of course, the clone's mother is the donor's mother. However, in terms of conception, the clone itself would have no parents. If the biological joining of the parents as such is what creates souls, where would a clone's soul come from? I'll tell you. The same line of questioning through Traducianism would have to consistently account for the concept of the sin nature being inherited from the father. Traducianism holds, for example, that it was the lack of a biological human father that resulted in Jesus being born free from a sin nature. If a clone lacks a literal human father, would the clone also lack an inherited sin nature? would the sin nature be duplicated through the clone's DNA? Strictly speaking, the inheritance of a sin nature is a separate question from obtaining a soul and raises many other points of possible debate. Now, the point is simply that if Traditionalism is to hold that both soul and sin nature are passed along at conception, it must account for both occurring or not during cloning. And I want you to notice that absolutely that one's perspective on this issue must account for natural clones, such as MZ twins. At the present time of conception, there is only one zygote. Later, there may be two, without any conception having occurred. Few, if any, traducians might suggest that only one of a set of twins or triplets actually has a soul, or that they share a single soul. So there needs to be some consistent way to account for the imparting of souls that cover all naturally made humans, which would then be compared to a cloning process. All right? In short, Traducianism leaves room to question whether or not a human clone would have a soul, if interpreted to mean souls are created by biological conception itself. Claiming that God decides when to imbue a soul would no longer be Traditionalism, when soul creatism. In response to that question, one who holds to Traducianism might well argue that the creation of a soul is simply something that occurs when a human of any type is created through whatever physical means. Whether or not this holds up to deeper scrutiny is subject to debate and better left to a separate discussion. Bottom line. Now, there are some more I'm about to cover with right here. In the more practical sense, few Christians might also suggest that how one is conceived impacts one's spiritual or moral status. For example, the common claim that abortions should be allowed in cases of rape or incest implies that people conceived under those circumstances are not people, less human or less valuable than those conceived in the right way. That's more of a moral debate than a theological one. However, our positions have to be consistent. If the circumstances of conception or lack of conception affect whether or not one has a soul, then one's moral or spiritual worth is certainly up for grabs. Christians must carefully consider their stance about this issue. And there is more, and I'm not quite finished with you yet, all right? And what I'm saying is there is no hard and fast, crystal clear answer to the question of whether or not a clone human would possess a soul. That being said, most interpretations of the Bible and the general sense of Christian theology might suggest clone human would, in fact, have souls. It's possible to construct a theological framework where they would not, yet most Christians would find that framework self-contradictory and unnecessarily. All right? And finally, and if you have your Bible or Bible app, mark the scriptures down so you can take notes and and jot it down right on social media, on Facebook, and find out what I'm talking about at that point. And finally, if you're lacking perfect understanding, we're obligated to treat all human beings as people worthy not only of the value God places in his creation. Read Psalms 104:24. But the love that he expects us to show each other, James 2:8. That includes artificial clone humans, if or when such persons come to exist. Now, what I have learned from in this series of messages is, believe it or not, there are no rights, there are no wrongs. Men and women both have to make decisions for themselves. If they want to raise their own family, then that's fine. However, the sperm would also have to join the egg if one wants to create a child, although the answers may be extremely more complicated than that. And if both the parents are this creator, then you are the parents of one. Meaning you're the donor, you're the donor's mom, that would be for the egg, and the donor's father for the sperm. But what's really so educational is whether you come into being or not, the parents are going to be answering some very hard questions. What kid will they belong to? What kid fits with the family? How will the kid ever fits the family as far as this thing with cloning or parenting is concerned? These are some of the questions you just have to answer yourselves. All right. Well, take good care. And I got 10 more days until my birthday. I will be 47 this year. Oh, and there is one other thing. Coming up next, I have Norbert and Rachel speaking to all of you from Bethesda Bible Church on their own series of messages as they begin a brand new title. You're going to like it and you're going to enjoy it. So please listen. If you go on Facebook, make sure you go to Bethesda Church and you'll see Norbert and Rachel. Listen to them in the same way you listen to me. I can be found on Taking Evangelism by Storm. Okay. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.